Welcome everyone, I'm Grace Kuriakanja and this is Africa Matters. Now Donald Trump is heading back to the White House and not everyone is celebrating. Many still remember his scatological comments about the African countries in 2018 and his infamous mispronunciation of Namibia as Namibia. And during his election campaign, he made a baseless allegation about undocumented immigrants from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So what's the reaction to a second Trump presidency? We asked our correspondents in Johannesburg, Abuja, and Kampala to find out.
Africans are generally curious people, and so many have been engaging with the U.S. election, be it on social media, in conversations with friends, family, and colleagues. A lot of people have something to say.
I was very surprised, extremely surprised that he was elected.
It definitely seems like America hasn't learned their lesson, especially after the first time. But in terms of us, he does seem to have more strict foreign policies, and obviously that means for us that the trades are going to be a lot more strict.
I would always prefer Trump based on economy, based on just aggression, quite a lot of things that he tackles as a man with aggression.
Based on Donald Trump's America First approach to politics and disparaging remarks which he made about African countries during his first term, some are concerned that he won't engage positively with African nations.
I think the Trump presidency could mean a lot of negative things for most African countries, actually. I mean, Trump in his previous presidency cut down funding to a lot of wellness things, a lot of things about sexual health. Considering the fact that so much of Africa and South Africa's health organizations, AIDS initiatives, everything like that, a lot of them are very much US funded.
For the next 4 years, people here are going to continue watching political developments closely, keen to see how a Trump presidency is going to impact not just South Africa, but the rest of the continent.
The Donald Trump presidency could have significant implications for Nigeria. For example, Nigeria could benefit from Trump's pro-oil stance, despite America diversifying its energy sources. Also, Trump's anti-China policies could potentially open doors for Nigerian markets to fill the void in global supply chains. But the African nation could also face many uncertainties given Trump's protectionist America First mantra, and this may give rise to stricter trade policies, reduced foreign aid, and more restrictive immigration controls.
I was rooting for Donald Trump, but I knew that his policies was not meant to cater to all, or to rather the three classes of society. That is the rich, the middle class, and the poor. The only people that have interest in Trump's emergence as a president for the second time are those that already have working businesses.
Trump's previous term was marked by immigration controls, including visa restrictions to countries like Nigeria that failed to, quote, meet U.S. security and information sharing standards. Many say if reintroduced, it will make it harder for Nigerians to study, work, and migrate to the U.S. Trump's stance on global governance and climate change are also raising concerns here. For instance, Nigerian leaders may face less U.S. scrutiny on elections, press freedom, and anti-corruption campaigns. His previous administration's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement sparked criticisms and could exacerbate environmental challenges in Nigeria if reenacted.
You know, some of the policies we might not find it very funny, but over time, it might be a plus to us.
However, on security matters, Donald Trump had previously maintained a focus on counterterrorism in West Africa and has a record of providing military and counterterrorism support to Nigeria, which, if prioritized again this time round, could enhance the country's fight against terror groups like Boko Haram and its ISIS affiliate.
Donald Trump is set to yet again work with Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni. Museveni has worked with 7 American presidents since he came to power in 1986. The Ugandan government, however, has recently come under scrutiny from Joe Biden's administration over social policies, particularly human rights. But, as analysts argue, Trump, whom Museveni in 2018 praised as one of America's best presidents ever, is expected to focus elsewhere.
For the Trump administration that is coming in, we are going to see a lot of Trump first or America first policies, where America is going to focus on what benefits it before it gives you anything. So when we look at trade, how many investors or what American investors are going to get opportunities in Uganda?
With Trump in power, I believe even the movement of businesses in different countries will also improve. As for Uganda, yeah, I believe we are expecting something bigger and bigger.
The change of guard at the White House means Uganda could become a key ally in combating terrorism in Africa, one of Trump's key priority areas.
Well, Trump has made it clear to the world that he'll put America first. Even though he hosted a number of African leaders during his first term, he did not visit the continent as president. However, the Trump administration launched his signature initiative, Prosper Africa, in 2019, which was designed to increase two-way trade and investment worth $14.2 billion between the United States and African countries. It was also aimed at countering Chinese influence on the continent, which is now Africa's largest trading partner. In this election, 40 diaspora Africans and their children were among those running for office. Pew Research Center data shows migrants from African nations represent only 5% of all immigrants in the U.S., but asylum seekers fear they could get caught up in Trump's threat to deport all undocumented migrants and end automatic citizenship for their children. That's about 375,000 Africans, according to a 2022 U.S. Census Bureau report. Now, during Trump's presidency, he ordered the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Somalia and removed Sudan from its state sponsors of terror list in exchange for normalizing ties with Israel as part of the Abraham Accords. But in 2017, he proposed deep cuts to foreign aid, such as the slashing of the U.S. aid budgets by close to 30%. Now, that hit Africa the hardest, and it's unclear if he'll push for the renewal of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, that allows duty-free access to the U.S. market for several African countries. Now let's hear more from Brooks Spector. He's a former American diplomat. He joins me from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Right, so straight into it. Just what does a Donald Trump win mean for the continent, given his past record, especially on two key issues, the economy and immigration?
I think part of what we need to know about the new Donald Trump administration is past performance in his first term of office is the best predictor. But this time around, he will have almost certainly a Congress that is Republican in both houses. He will have that much more experience, and he will clearly have a mandate from citizens who have voted for him, and perhaps even a majority of Americans who actually voted for Donald Trump this time. I think the key thing that we need to think about in terms of relationships with Africa is the term reciprocity. The Trump position on international issues is very much uninclined to have unilateral benefits accruing to others from the United States. This is why the African Growth and Opportunity Act may, and I emphasize the word may, come under threat in 2025 when it is due for renewal or ending. Because as it stands now, it is a one-way transaction in terms of the benefits. The American economy is open for African exports without duties or tariffs. And there is no reciprocal requirement on the part of African nations to open their trade to American exports without duties or tariffs.
I want us to switch gears, please, and talk about immigration, because it's also a key issue, because he promises mass deportation. So how is that bound? How is that going to affect Africa as a continent? And the Africans in the diaspora, of course.
Yeah, part of the problem is, of course, that mass deportations require an extraordinary amount of planning, management, facilities, personnel, and money. Depending on how you calculate this, people argue there are somewhere between 11 million And at the outside number from some Trump supporters, 24, 25 million non-documented aliens in the United States. Trying to deport even a major fraction of any of that is an enormously complex idea, an enormously difficult task, and one that would put the economy in something of a tailspin, because many of those people are working in agricultural pursuits on farms and processing, abattoir work. Many of those people are working in cities and towns in the service industries, such as restaurants. The idea that you could simply round up people in the millions and put them on buses or something and send them across a border. There are only two borders to be sent across. One's Canada, which is unlikely to engage itself with this, or Mexico, which is equally unlikely. The whole thing boggles the mind as to how this is going to work. What there might well be are selective or demonstration efforts to do it. But one of the things you don't want to see happen as a government official, as a business person, is total instability and disruption to the economy when workers by the millions are summarily dispatched. Also, there are questions of what kinds of laws would have to be changed to allow such processes to happen. Even illegal immigrants have some residual rights in terms of how they are treated.
I want us to again switch gears and talk about his approach, which is clear, America first. So how, or is he likely to change his engagement with Africa and sort of like shift the US-Africa policy, seeing that he's been clear all along, it's America first for him?
Well, as we were discussing when we started, much of the current American policies really toward Africa, there are a mix of them. There are economic and trade ones, and there are security ones, and there are international cooperative policies. Let's take that last one first. Under a Trump administration, you're going to see much less engagement, I think, on international global climate initiatives. And those, of course, have an enormous impact on Africa because many African countries would suffer or are already suffering the consequences of deforestation and desertification and high temperatures that are ruining cropland. You will find, because Donald Trump has labeled the climate change initiatives hoaxes, you're going to find a whole lot less enthusiasm for participating in such international endeavors. With regard to trade, remember I said the key is going to be reciprocity. African nations or a nation or nations are going to, I suspect, need to demonstrate that there is a two-way avenue on this. It isn't simply going to be American largesse through AGOA or similar measures. You're also, I suspect, going to see pressure on some of the aid projects. Prosper Africa, you've mentioned, Power Africa, possibly PEPFAR, the program that supplies help to deal with HIV. And AIDS.
Let's talk about another pressing issue for the continent right now, the ongoing conflicts in Sudan, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the security situation in the Sahel region. Just what role can Trump's administration play in curing all this? Because in his campaign trail, Trump did not mention anything to do with the war in Sudan, for instance. But now that he's in power, what can he do about it? What should he do, actually?
Yeah. To be fair, nobody mentioned Sudan. It's one of the black holes in international discussion. You don't even see African governments who are nearby engaging hard and strenuously to end that conflict, except in occasional moments. I mean, the conflict itself, if I remember the numbers, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 people have died. It's probably more than that. There are numbers that tell you 10 million people are on the raw edge of starvation and famine. The conflict itself is destroying cities and forcing populations to become, both internal and external refugees. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have an insider's view into the Trump administration that is not even yet in place. But I think the Trump administration, once it gets its footing, is going to say, this is Africa's problem to solve, or this is Africa plus the AU plus the UN's problem to solve.
All right, thank you. That's where we ended. Thank you so much, Mr. Brooks Spector there, a former American diplomat. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution, sir. All right, so we have more stories for you here on Africa Matters, including...
I'm Kelechi Emekalam, here to tell you about how female farmers in Nigeria are grappling with climate change and limited access to financial support, a struggle impacting their livelihoods and the nation's food security.
I am Ronin Sikamam, and I will be telling you more about a devastating cholera outbreak in the West African nation of Ghana.
To Nigeria's agricultural heartland now, where female farmers carry the burden of both labor shortages and systemic barriers, many face the extreme conditions brought on by the climate crisis with limited support, relying solely on traditional tools and their own personal resilience. Kelechi Emekalam sheds light on the struggles of women farmers across the West African country.
48-year-old Grace Abba is tackling the harsh effects of extreme weather. For over 2 decades, she's managed her farmland with just basic manual farm tools, growing various crops including beans, corn, cassava, yams and rice. Grace's desire to expand has been unattainable due to financial constraints.
The challenge I'm having is money. I don't have money, and by the time I sold all those crops in the market, the money will not be enough for me to expand my farm. So if there is the money, I will buy this tractor and machine, this pumping machine.
A 2022 World Bank report shows that women in Nigeria make up 20% of the agricultural workforce, yet they contribute to nearly half of all rural food production. And only 27% of Nigerian women have access to formal loans, compared to 50% of men.
The struggles of female farmers, particularly in rural communities, are stark. Despite their significant contribution to agriculture, they face daunting challenges: climate change devastating their yields and financial exclusion hindering their recovery. But the impact extends far beyond individual farmers. Food insecurity looms large, and the nation's productivity suffers.
The latest Global Hunger Index ranks Nigeria 110th out of 127 countries, meaning nearly 100 million Nigerians don't have enough food to eat. Experts warn that neglecting the needs of female farmers could have severe consequences for Nigeria's food security.
This is the time to empower these women. This is the time to ramp up food production, so that at least when they have access to inputs, they have access to markets, they are able to adapt to climate change and all of that, the food production will go up.
Gender rights advocate Dorothy Njamanze says the deeper social-cultural barriers need to be addressed.
Because the woman is not recognized as worthy of having property, these things go to the men. So in so many ways, there are a lot of cultural practices across board that disenfranchise women from having access to resources that they need.
Many, like Grace, are calling for programs designed to support rural women farmers. They say access to financing and modern tools would empower them to boost yields, reduce food insecurity, and ultimately strengthen Nigeria's economy. Kelechi Emekalam, Africa Matters, Abuja.
Now we take you to Western Kenya, where a new weapon is helping farmers win a different kind of fight against crop-killing witchweed. Abida Hito has more.
Meet Catherine Wanjala, a maize farmer in Butere, Kenya. She says these once barren fields tell a story of resilience. Wanjala's agricultural efforts were previously stymied by witchweed, or striga, a parasitic plant that attacks maize at its roots, devouring vital nutrients.
I used to apply fertilizer 2 times a season to my maize plantation, but by knee height, the plantation was ravaged by the purple witchweed, causing poor maize yields.
For farmers like Wanjala, striga infestation destroys not only their crops, but their livelihoods too. Michael Njagi, a policy officer with the World Food Programme, says the impact can be devastating.
In Western Kenya, which has a potential of being the bread basket, there is an estimated 340,000 hectares under striga infestation. What that means is that farmers may lose up to 100% of their crops, of their potential harvest, because striga attacks the roots of the crops, sucks the life out of them by sucking the nutrients, and then the crop is just stunted and cannot produce anything.
But there's a new solution, Kichawi Kill, a bioherbicide developed by a publicly funded enterprise called Toothpick. Unlike chemical pesticides, this herbicide uses a naturally occurring fungus to target striga, leaving other crops and the ecosystem unharmed.
It does not cause any harm to any other crop or any other human. In scientific terms, we say that it's host-specific. And to add on, it was isolated from a wilting striga in the soil. So when we take it back to the soil, it's gone back to its natural habitat, so the ecosystem is not affected.
With a 675% increase in Wanjala's harvest, this innovative agrotech could help millions of farmers across Africa reclaim their land and their lives. Obaida Hito, Africa Matters.
To Ghana next, where health officials are trying to contain a cholera outbreak that has killed nearly a dozen people. Many more have been hospitalized. The residents of the capital, Accra, are particularly concerned that the raw sewage swirling around their neighborhoods will spread the disease. Rolling Sikamam reports from the capital, Accra.
Like in many other places in the city, authorities do little to clean up Ibrahim Razak's neighborhood, so residents have to do it.
I fight people every time not to dump rubbish here. I tell them we will all suffer when there is an outbreak. They come to dump it after I have gone to bed. People don't want to go and pay to discard their refuse, so they end up in the sea.
It's wells by the coast. Much of the city's refuse is carried down the Odo River and ends up here. The people living by the sea say they are particularly vulnerable to infection of the unsanitary conditions. There are a few toilets, no fresh running water here. The people resort to open defecation and use plastic bags. However, the main concern is discharge from Accra's septic waste, where they fish for food and fetch water.
You can see the clean Accra. They are putting the feces inside the water. They have their pipe here that they bring the feces and put it in the water. And in fact, if it's put in there, the smell here is very hazard. We might even die through that or have some serious disease through that. But who are you to talk about it?
Many blame this for the latest cholera outbreak that is spreading and fast. Within a 100-kilometer radius of Accra, hundreds of cases and some fatalities have been recorded.
In recent years, we've actually had a resurgence of cholera in the African continent, and a lot of things have accounted for it, including climate change that has resulted in floods and so on. We also have some conflicts in the sub-region. So all these contribute to us seeing a number of countries reporting outbreaks. But for cholera to thrive, usually it has to do with water and sanitation.
But that's not the only problem. In many of Accra's markets, this is what you find. heaps of refuse, and foodstuff traders are selling nearby.
Cholera thrives in places with unsafe drinking water, poor sanitation, and inadequate hygiene. Places like this, in other words. And this is 8 years after President Nana Ado's pledge to make Accra the cleanest city in Africa.
Ghana has experienced sporadic major outbreaks since the 1980s, including over 15,000 cases in 1982 and nearly 29,000 cases nearly a decade ago. Ghanaians fear that history may repeat itself if the heaps of garbage and filth are not properly managed. Rollin Sikamam, Africa Matters, Accra, Ghana.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode or ideas on what you'd like us to cover on YouTube or on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Grace Kanja.